It is 6:01. So in that case, I'd like to call the January 20th, 2021 board meeting to order and remind everyone to please mute your audio when you're not speaking, and please state your name prior to making a comment or a motion or a second for an action item. And I thank you for that. I'll ask that each commissioner please respond with a here when I call out his name. Commissioner Doan?
Here.
Commissioner Duggan?
Here.
Commissioner Sanders?
Here.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Here.
And I am Commissioner Bagnall. I too am here. So moving smoothly into Commissioner oh, no, sorry, I bypassed something. Moving to the reports by the Chief Executive Officer and management staff. Take it away, Tom.
Thank you, President Bagnall. Commissioners, good evening. Let me pull up my presentation here for this part of the show. And I really, really hope you're not. I can already tell, huh? All right. Gosh darn it.
Well, we can see it, but it's like your working copy instead of the show.
Right. And yeah. So, well, yeah, I tried again. All right. I'm just going to go with this if that's okay. The Portland Cryptosporidium results for the month of December 2020, the Portland Water Bureau reported a total of 8 Cryptosporidium oocyst detections in water samples collected from the Bull Run headworks. The Oregon Health Authority has determined that the public does not need to take additional protections at this time. Portland Water Bureau will continue increased sampling 4 times per week until there are at least 3 weeks without any detections. Complete results of Portland's Cryptosporidium monitoring are posted on the Water Bureau's website.
So you're live now, just so you know.
I am.
Yeah.
All right. So if I go to slideshow, is it that it's showing correctly?
It's showing COVID-19 response correctly.
Tom, I'm presenting.
You stole. Okay. Thank you.
The wizard behind the curtain.
Don't look behind the green curtain.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Okay, so COVID-19 response. Risk management staff continue to remain involved in local emergency response meetings and are working towards obtaining COVID-19 vaccines for staff once eligible. A survey is being conducted to determine which staff would like to receive the vaccination. Those staff who are required to report to the office will take priority if supplies are limited. So the survey right now, we have a pretty good response. We're just waiting for 6 more employees to respond. The majority want to get vaccinated, which is great news. As far as water quality, and I'm sorry, this Friday afternoon, I have a meeting with Washington County where we will learn more about where we're at in the queue. So more information to come. On water quality risks, water in idled buildings, Tualatin Valley Water District delivers safe, high-quality water that is not impacted by the coronavirus and remains safe to drink during the COVID-19 crisis. However, maintaining water quality within buildings is a shared responsibility. Building owners are responsible for maintaining the water quality once it enters the building. Stagnant water can result in potential health risks. So in downtown Portland area, they had a water quality issue, and it was directly related to the stagnant water inside the building. So it's important that if you have a building that isn't being occupied, that you make sure you flush it, so you keep that water safe. All right. Building owner, oh, here we go. Building owners tenants should take the following actions to reduce these risks. Run all water fixtures at least weekly. While buildings are closed or used significantly less, you should run all water for 10 to 30 minutes each week to refresh the water in the building's pipes. Follow the guidance from the Environmental Science Policy and Research Institute on how to flush the water in your building. The goal is to refresh all the water in the building pipes with fresh water from TVWD's water mains beneath the street. Check your hot water system. Set your hot water to at least 120 degrees Fahrenheit. When flushing hot water taps, run the water until it reaches its highest temperature. Next slide. And finally, take steps before reopening. Follow the CDC's 8 steps to take before your business or building reopens. Make sure to use personal protective equipment when performing building maintenance. Additional information on this matter is available via TVWD's website. Next slide. On TVWD uniforms, we want to thank you to the commissioners for serving as elected officials and performing governance and policy making roles for the Tualatin Valley Water District. Each commissioner was provided a gray polo style shirt with the new full color logo. This new technology replaces screen printing and stitching during a 2-year pilot program. The fiber lock technology is cheaper than stitching and provides a consistent look on each uniform item. We just got word today that there was some problems with these, so if any of the commissioners do have any problems, please let us know. We can return the shirt and get you a new one. So it sounded like during the process of putting the logo on, they had some sort of issues. So let us know. Make sure you wear them and wash them, and should be fine. The pilot testing period was designed for us to determine if the wear of this flocked logo will hold up under the weather and working conditions in the field. This material can be applied to
This is something new. Are conditions in the field, do they include underwater?
Yes, we now are going to have the commissioners
That was usually kind of a hip boot thing.
Yeah, you can tell where my mind is. We're going to have the commissioners do internal pipe inspections now. So this material can be applied to anything that fits into a heat press and won't melt, so it saves money by enabling us to purchase the logo patch in bulk, eliminates setup fees, and can be used for small batch applications like summer cruise staff. Using staff survey feedback, the ordering process has been automated and new rotating items were added. With additional process changes identified for 2021, TVWD will work with staff to deliver efficiency in tracking the uniform allowances and receiving the uniforms earlier in the fall of each year. Next. So next, I'm going to turn this over to Dave Kraska. He's going to give a department report on the Willamette Water Supply Program, and he will also provide our safety minutes. So take it away, Dave.
Thanks, Tom. Let's do safety first, as always, right? Let me try to work my internet magic here. There we go. Okay. Is it working?
It
Yes.
is working. Perhaps you should confer with Tom to see what he's doing wrong.
Yeah, I need a different button. My button doesn't seem to work.
No. The fact that I survive on my own, clicking whatever I click, I don't want to teach other people. Yeah. So, anyways.
Okay. Yeah, don't jinx it.
Exactly. So, good evening, President Bagnall, commissioners. I got a short safety moment and a similarly short department report for you tonight, kind of in contrast to my really long presentations I make during the work sessions. So we'll keep this one brief. But our safety moment tonight is about getting an annual checkup, and the importance of annual checkups should be obvious, but it's One of the things to think about is human nature to be reactive instead of proactive in many aspects in life. Wait for things to happen and react to them instead of taking action to avoid them. But our health is one of those areas where many people do not take steps to improve until a problem occurs. Going to the doctor for an annual checkup is an important part of a proactive approach towards maintaining good health. So, what are the benefits? Well, you can seek care for any nagging issues or any new issues that have appeared, especially since this pandemic that we're all living through. You can talk with your health provider about any chronic conditions such as heart disease, diabetes, or arthritis. Screenings via imaging, blood work, and lab tests can catch serious diagnoses such as cancer, osteoporosis, and other diseases that at the most treatable stage. Vaccines, not just COVID, but a lot of other things, and immunizations can help reduce your chances of getting sick from several preventable diseases, and a whole bunch of them are listed here in the sub-bullet. Review your personal and family health history to determine how to reduce your risks for health concerns, things that might be predicted by your family history. And then also asking your provider for things to keep in mind as you get older to prevent or forestall joint pain, weakening eyesight, hearing loss, and other problems that sometimes come with age. So how can we help? When you go to the doctor's office, if you've got to fill out a health questionnaire, try to do so as accurately and honestly as possible. Have a plan before you go to the doctor's office. Write down key things you want to talk to the doctor about when you get to the appointment, and be open with the doctor. Don't be shy or embarrassed to talk about any problems or concerns you may have. So, in summary, our health really is everything, and everything you do in your life depends on your good health. So go to the doctor every year, whether you feel good or not. And catching a small problem before it grows into something major may make all the difference. That concludes the safety moment. Continuing on now with the department.
Dave, just one more thing before you move on. I would just like to add one other thing. As a person with 91-year-old parents who both have heart conditions, it's a really good idea if somebody may have some anxiety about what they might hear from the doctor, to be sure that they have someone else with them. So 2 sets of ears and 2 sets of questions really have been helpful for my family.
That is outstanding advice. I've had similar experience with my parents and doctor's appointments. Doctor's appointments can be stressful, especially with some of the things you might deal with as you grow older, and confusing. So much information and technical information you get at a doctor's office, and for the poor person dealing with the situations, it can be hard to absorb all of that and think of questions to ask and remember it all and everything. So yeah, that is great advice. I totally agree. So continuing on now with the department report. Just a single topic tonight to talk about. What I picked was tracking on-time completion. So, and finishing on time has always been a focus for us on the program. And first off, it's part of our mission statement. Stated here, it's to provide a cost-effective, reliable, resilient water supply system by July 2026. So that was one of the main parts of the mission statement, and it continues that benefits current and future generations, so the communities we serve, and supports a vibrant local economy. So it's always been kind of one of our main charges. Having a target of on-time completion also helps TVWD, Hillsborough, and Beaverton plan both their finances and their water supplies. And then finally, on-time completion is a hallmark of excellent infrastructure project performance. Everybody involved in the program, including all the folks at TVWD, Hillsborough, and Beaverton, wanted to do well. They want to be part of a winning project, and finishing on schedule is certainly part of that. So a big element to that is our Gantt chart. Very complex graphic here that I've presented to you a number of times. Down the left-hand side are all the projects and sub-projects that we have going on in the program, and across the top is our timeline going from 2017 all the way out to 2026 when we need to be complete. And this Gantt chart shows that we have planned out exactly what is happening when as the years go on, and we can track and manage that as we go and make sure that we're proceeding according to plan. So, but in 2017, and this was before we started the Willamette Water Supply System Commission, we were still just operating as the program under a project agreement with Hillsborough. The program began looking at where it needed to be at the halfway point, or in 2021, in order to check. Basically, kind of a big milestone there is like, are we on track? Are we doing everything that we need to be to finish on time? And this was really in response to a request from our executive committee back at that time. You might remember our executive committee was Mark Knudsen and Kevin Hanway. Those were the folks that we answered to back then. And they asked us this question: what do we need to be done with in the middle of 2021 in order to know that we're on track for finishing on time? And so with that question, we went back and we identified and began tracking various risk categories that had some relationship to completion at the halfway point. And this includes some elements of our raw water facilities design and construction, our water treatment plant design, our land use process, governance and intergovernmental agreements, and some other things related to various other risk categories. And so with that structure and that kind of plan to target where do we need to be in 2021, we started giving quarterly updates on these metrics in September of 2017. We began giving them to the executive committee, and then when we converted over to the Willamette Water Supply System Commission, we began giving them to our management committee. And here they are. These are the categories that we were targeting, the main top categories that we were targeting to make sure that we're going to be on track for completion and where we expected to be in the middle of this year, by June of 2021. And so at the top, it's the water treatment plant project. Second column is the raw water facilities project. The third column is all of our land use approvals across the program. And then the last one is our agreements, primarily intergovernmental agreements. And related to the water treatment plant, we wanted to make sure by June of 2021 that our land use was approved, our permit modification was approved, and 90% design was complete. And what I mean by our permit modification was approved is basically the overall 401 permit that we have for the program, that we made some modifications related to our work, our planned at the treatment plant, that was approved through that permit modification process. And I'm happy to say that we're on target on all of those. Our land use land use application was approved last month, actually in December. So we're ahead of schedule on that one. We're on target for our permit modification approval, and we received our 90% design this month as well. So we're in great shape where we plan to be for our water treatment plant project. Regarding our raw water facilities project, by June of 2021, we wanted to have our intake screens replaced. We wanted to have our seismic improvement work underway, the construction of it underway, and our pipeline construction underway. Now, of these three, we're in great shape. Seismic improvements will be mostly complete by June. The pipeline construction will certainly be underway by June. The intake screens will not be replaced by June, but they're scheduled to be replaced in the fall. And given the amount of float that we have on that project, we're in great shape on that one as well. Regarding our land use approvals, we wanted to make sure that all of our land use applications were submitted, and wherever we had any appeals on those land use applications, we understood the impact of them and that it wasn't going to affect our on-time completion. To date, we have submitted all of our land use applications, and we have not, or almost all of our land use applications, and we have not had any appeals. We expect there may be one on our PLW 2.0 project. But we'll see if that one comes in, but I'm confident that we'll be able to manage that one as well. And finally, regarding our agreements, we wanted to make sure that all of our key agreements were in place, especially with our other governmental agencies that we're coordinating with, and that we're collaborating with these partners to meet the terms of the agreements in terms of schedule and cost. And in terms of that, all of that is on track and going according to plan as well. So in summary, we are on track for on-time completion according to the plans we have in place, and we've got a lot of challenges remaining, and the program will continue to track, manage, and mitigate them wherever possible. And finally, in the current economic environment, the program is working with TVWD, Hillsborough, and Beaverton to evaluate and manage the cash flow and rate impacts associated with the current plan, and we'll make modifications as necessary to make sure that we remain successful. With that, glad to, well, certainly thank you for your continued support as we continue on with this program, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
This is Dick. Good presentation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for Dave? Well, thank you very much. Tom, is there anything else from the CEO report?
I do have one thing that I wanted to ask the commissioners about, and that is the SDAO conference is coming up. It's virtual, it's free, and there's we got to figure out who's voting. So as you know, the WRWC is allowed to vote during the conference, and we're working with Commissioner Sanders on that. But also TVWD is permitted to vote. And I'm wondering if there's a commissioner interested in representing TVWD during that conference and voting during the caucus and annual business meetings.
This is Jim Dawn. I could do it.
Okay.
Oh, bless your heart, because I just, I've been to so many SDAO educational things. Going to the meeting without the networking benefits has zero appeal. So if you'd be willing to handle that, Jim, that'd be great.
So Commissioner Doan, we will send you the dates and times just so it's on your calendar, but the caucus meeting will be on February 3rd from 1 to 2:30, and the annual business meeting is on February 4th from 1 to 2:30. So, but we'll send you information and invites on that. Other than that, I have nothing else.
Okie dokie. So then, turning to Commissioner communications and reports of meetings attended, I will ask you in alphabetical order, starting with Commissioner Doan. What are your meetings attended?
Well, let's see. I had a graduate class, and the teacher would always call on us in alphabetical order, and I never had time to actually finish all the homework, so I could get, do about 3 in a row, and then sort of guess the number of people, and while everybody else was talking, I would do those. So my wife's maiden name is Jean Walker, so she never had that advantage. Okay, starting with the work session on January 5th, then the Joint Water Commission and Barney Joint Operating Commission on January 8th. And then because of problems that the Joint Water Commission has had with the inspection of concrete pours, I took a class with the Association of State Dam Safety Officials to discuss inspection issues with mass concrete pours. And then on the 14th, Todd and I joined with Tom and Paul to talk about economic issues. Also on the 14th, the Aloha Business Association met. On the 15th, West Side Economic Forum. I don't know that was the actual day of the meeting, but that's when I joined the webinar, and then tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Doan. Turning to Commissioner Duggan, your meetings attended.
Okay, trying to get things working here. On December 22nd, I met with Tom and Dave to talk about the WWSS planning and what was going to happen at the January meeting regarding officers. On the 5th, I attended the board work session where we got the WWSS update, strategic planning, and found out what NACE was, NACE, the National Association of Corrosion Engineers. I didn't know that organization existed until the 5th of January this year. On the 7th, we had the WWSS board meeting and executive session. And at that meeting, I resigned being chair, and David Judah from the city of Hillsborough is now the chair of the WWS and I was elected vice chair. On the 13th, I attended the Regional Water Providers Consortium Executive Committee meeting where we briefly discussed the budget, which will go to the full board the first week of February at our regularly third of the year meeting of the full board. We also talked about the fact that there's going to be a lot of new faces at the February board meeting. We had a new member show up at the executive committee, Jeanette Shaw from the city of Tigard joined. She replaced Tom Anderson. We're also going to have Wilsonville join us beginning in July. And then with all the other election results that took place from November, Mingus Maps will be the assigned commissioner that will hopefully be able to attend the Regional Water Providers Consortium meeting. We also, and Carrie will talk about this later on in the meeting, we briefly discussed the annual report that covered the last fiscal year. We also talked about concerns about re-entering buildings that Tom also addressed in his general manager's report. Yesterday I had a meeting with Bernice, Tom, and Paul to talk about budget, and then tonight's meeting. So that is my reports of meetings attended for the last month.
Thank you, Commissioner Duggan. Turning to Commissioner Sanders, what meetings do you have on your list? Commissioner Sanders, I think you may need to unmute.
Here I was all excited to talk about my gray polo. So on January 5th, we had the work session, the monthly work session where we talked about strategic planning and indeed a very exciting presentation on cathodic protection, which I haven't forgotten about and loved. On January 14th, as Jim Doan said, we met with the CEO and the CFO to talk about some of the strategic planning for next year's budget. And then I have today's monthly board meeting.
Thank you. And I want to say that your TVWD polo looks good on you. You're rocking it. It's all good. So turning now to Commissioner Schmidt, your meetings attended.
Yes, this is Dick. I have 4. On the 5th, the work session. On the 8th, Joint Water Commission. And on the 12th, I met with you and Tom about agenda planning, and tonight's regular board.
Thank you. And then for me, a lot of this is going to sound familiar. I have the work session, the board work session on the 5th, where we got an update on the Willamette water supply system, and we heard about the CEO's strategic direction. On the 8th, I attended the Barney Reservoir and JWC meeting where we talked about rates and SDCs, the master plan, and a plant update. On the 12th, I attended a meeting with the CEO and the board vice president to do agenda planning. On the 19th, I attended a meeting with Commissioner Duggan, the CEO, and the CFO to get a pre-budget briefing, if you will. And then on tonight, we have, of course, the regular board meeting. And I did not put on my polo shirt, but I have it right here. And cute it is. So that's all of the commissioners' meetings attended. Do we have any topics to be raised by commissioners?
This is Jim Doan. I just thought a week on Monday, the Willamette Intake Facilities meeting meets, or committee, or whatever it is, meets. And at that point, I will cease to be the chair, and we will go to a rotational system, much like the Joint Water Commission has. And that seemed to be about the best way to do it. And I think that Dave is probably going to provide more meat to the bones I've just thrown. But anyway, I thought I'd so you could give you a preview of coming attractions.
Thank you. That's interesting. Are there other topics? In that case, we move to the public comment section. The public comment time is set aside for persons wishing to address the board on items on the consent agenda and matters not on the regular agenda. Additional public comment will be invited on agenda items as they are presented. Do we have any persons on the call who would like to be able to comment? Hearing none, we'll move to the consent agenda. See, the problem with having my camera on is you can see that I'm totally reading this stuff, but thank you, Debbie, for the script. Consent agenda items are considered to be routine and may be enacted in one motion without separate discussion. Any board member may request that an item be removed by motion for discussion and separate action. Any items requested to be removed from the consent agenda for separate discussion will be considered immediately after the board has approved those items which do not require separate discussion. Tonight's consent agenda has 3 items. The first is to approve the December 16th, 2020 regular meeting minutes. The second is to approve the January 5th, 2021 work session minutes. And the third is to adopt Resolution 01-21, which is the resolution adopting the investment policy for the Tualatin Valley Water District. And I might add that is a routine action that is taken every year. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented?
This is Jim Duggan, so moved.
This is Jim Doan, I second.
Commissioner Duggan moved, Commissioner Doan seconded. So if our district recorder will please provide a roll call vote.
Commissioner Bagnall?
Yes.
Commissioner Doan?
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan?
Yes.
Commissioner Sanders?
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
As that is unanimous, the motion passes. Turning to the business agenda, we have one item on tonight's business agenda, and that is to consider adopting Resolution 02-21, a resolution amending system development charges for the Tualatin Valley Water District and declaring an effective date. We'll have a staff report from our CFO, Paul Matthews.
You're muted, Paul.
Yes, I know. I couldn't, after I went into presentation mode, I couldn't find the mute button back. Sorry about that. I was so proud of myself getting the presentation up, then I couldn't find the unmute button. President Bagnall, Commissioners, good evening. Paul Matthews, Chief Financial Officer. I have a rather routine item for you all tonight, which is the inflationary adjustment to our system development charges. If I can operate this system, we'll be in good shape. The presentation will be pretty short. I'm going to give you a quick overview of the process that we use for the adjustments, history of the adjustments themselves, and then we'll talk about the proposed adjustments in comparison to other communities, nearby communities, as well as comparison to other system development charges that are assessed. So first, the overview of the SDC itself was most recently Ordinance 01-12. Provides the basis for our system development charges, was enacted by the board in 2012. It requires the district to review the SDCs each year and to make adjustments based on changes in the engineering news record construction cost index for Seattle, and it complies with Oregon law. Presented here is the history of our SDCs over time. Interestingly enough, if you look at the engineering news record and the average annual rate of growth since 2011, it's gone up about 3.95%. This year, a little bit more than the average over that period of time. The engineering news record has gone up by 6.02%, and that's from December of 2019 through December of 2020. So we've had a slight uptick in the engineering news record construction cost index. And that was true actually last year. It was almost 5%. It was just under 5%. So the SDCs, based on the inflationary adjustment as outlined in Ordinance 01-12, would go from $7,788 to $8,257 for a 5/8 by 3/4 inch meter, and that's the standard meter size for a single-family residential home. It is a $469 increase. The cost for larger meters is based on proportionate increase based on that 6.02%, and it's based on the estimated amount of water that the various meter sizes use. No change in that. For meters that are larger than 1.5 inches, we have the ordinance specifies a formula that will be used. It's a combination of two components. One that's based on the peak day demand. The other one, a storage charge, which is based on the average annual demand. And the charges for those are listed here as well. Where do we stand with the other communities? Basically, we're in the same position rank-wise as we were last year. Not surprisingly, most of the utilities around the region are following the engineering news record, and theirs goes up in a proportionate way as well. So we're kind of in the middle of the pack.
So Paul, just out of curiosity, do the other entities that we're comparing with, do they tend to raise them to adjust their SDCs at the same time of year that we do, or are they on a very different schedule?
Most of them do it July 1 to coincide with their budget, I would say. So I think the December to December is somewhat unusual, if that answers your question.
Well, it does, and it tells me that several of these people we're comparing against will all go up in 4 months, 5 months.
Yes. And these will be effective March 1st. The resolution has specifies that as the effective date. So it's literally 3 months before the end of the fiscal year, or 4 months before the end of the fiscal year. The other thing that we look at is if you take the system development charges in total for the other services which have SDCs associated with them in our region, we're about less than 25%, about 23% of the total SDC charge. So that's for water, sanitary sewer, stormwater management, transportation development tax, which pays for the streets, and then parks and recreation is the other one. And those are those go up as well. THPRD had a new methodology this past year, and they're actually going to have a new rate coming up as soon as the cities and counties can implement that on their behalf. But in any event, we're about 23-25% of the total SDC charge. So with that, answer any questions you have, but our recommendation is the board adopt resolution number 0221, setting the system development charges and an effective date of March 1st. With that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Do board members have any questions for Paul? Has there been any significant input from the homeowners, home builders association? So
I contacted them, which is our normal routine, and they're fine with I told them we're having a meeting. I told them what we were doing, and they didn't have concern about that. What they are doing, though, is working with utilities around the region. Many utilities assess the SDC at the time that a permit is taken out, and they would like to see the SDC payable at the time that home is occupied or closer to the time that the development is over. And of course, we assess the SDC at the time that a meter is installed, because that's the nexus between the impact on our system is the actual installation of the meter when people can start drawing the demand on our water system. So we had a conversation about that, but they really didn't have any concerns about the pretty routine adjustment that we do on an annual basis.
Well, it seems to me that's a perennial question they have, and it's one of wanting to shift the risk from themselves to us, which doesn't appeal to me, but there you go. So are there other questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 02-21, which is a resolution amending system development charges for the Tualatin Valley Water District and declaring an effective date?
This is Dick. I so move.
And this is Todd. I second.
So Commissioner Schmidt has moved, Commissioner Sanders has seconded. District Recorder, would you please provide a roll call vote?
Commissioner Bagnall,
Yes.
Commissioner Doan,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanders,
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. It is unanimous and the motion passes. We will move now to informational presentations. And the first one is an informational presentation on the district initiatives and financial plan update with a staff report from CEO Tom Hickman and CFO Paul Matthews.
Thank you. We're going to pull up the presentation here.
I'm doing that now, Tom, but I believe I'm
That's
having
what
some of
you
the
say.
same I'm having some of the same problems that Tom was having. So let me just rejigger this. And the last one was just fine, and this one I'm having challenges with. Let me.
So while you do this, let me announce to the other members of the board and to any members of the public who may be listening in, the last 25, perhaps 30% of this presentation is a financial plan update. And I have asked Paul to summarize that and keep it very short, because having previewed the first 2/3, it seems like they cover most of the relevant information, and that might just be a bit repetitive to include all of that information at the end. So if there are questions, of course, we'll bring that stuff back in, but otherwise we'll cut it just a little bit short from what was shown in the agenda package.
Okay, so Paul and I are going to co-present tonight on this, but I also have the rest of the leadership team here, and there'll be parts that I'm going to ask them to speak to very briefly, and certainly they're available for questions. So tonight what we're going to be talking about is just a little bit of review from what we showed the board a couple weeks ago. We're going to review the strategic planning process and review the district's financial management process. And then we're going to discuss the 5 major themes. And then we're going to review the proposed district initiatives, discuss the various risks involved, and then review the history of financial plans, discuss some options for financial strategies, review risks to the forecast, receive board direction and feedback, and then update on the financial performance. Okay, so here's where we're at. We're in the latter of the green boxes there. And we're looking at what our financial strategies are to incorporate the rough cost estimates of, it's not just the proposed initiatives, it's mostly a lot. You'll see here momentarily, it's a lot of the stuff that we're currently doing, which is really driving the whole financial strategy. But we'll talk more about that. And ultimately what we're looking for from the board this evening is some direction on where they're comfortable with the financial strategies, so we can start to move towards really building the rest of the budget behind what the financial strategy is. Next slide, Paul. So I'm going to turn this over to Paul at this point because this is a slide he had shown many of you before I came on board with the district. So Paul.
Thank you, Tom. In fact, I think all of you saw this slide back in March of 2019 when we were presenting our financial strategies that were the basis for the 1921 biennium, the biennium that we're in now. And as I typically do when I give a financial forecast, I always want to put these the risks in there so we understand what kind of risks that we may see in the future. And you know, it's very easy for us to put numbers into a spreadsheet, crank them out. It's a little bit more difficult to gather the numbers and know how they may change over time. So with that, we laid these risks out to the board back in March 2019. Many of them didn't materialize. For example, higher costs from Portland. We didn't experience unusually higher costs from Portland. That wasn't too much of an issue. Interest rates actually went down, so we didn't have an issue there. Capital expenditures, we always need to watch those things. Project definitions can rise. We are worried about construction costs. I just talked about the Engineering News Record Construction Cost Index going up at 6.02% most recently, and the year before that it was in the high 4%. So, you know, that's something that's on the radar screen, but so far we can't attribute increase in our construction cost as affecting our finance plan. And then we turn to the other category, and that's really where we've been hit. We didn't know we were going to have a pandemic and a resulting financial crisis, but that did happen. So we had a very significant economic downturn. I've been talking to you about that pretty much every month since this occurred back in March. Also, prior to the COVID, you might also remember from the various monthly presentations that I've been doing, we saw a reduction in our water demands that was unprecedented based on past years. And the other thing is that in our financial plan, we do take into account the activities within the IGA that we have with Beaverton in terms of their separation. Right now, we charge Beaverton a wheeling rate, and they have plans to separate certain parts of the area for the that we are willing to a little bit earlier than we had, so that's going to have somewhat of effect on our revenues. So when you look at those are really the things that hit us in terms of the risks. Curtailment, we didn't have curtailment. PERS costs we managed through our site account. So right here, these are the key things. It's really the economics and the water demands and the revenue themselves that have caused our current economic challenges. So I want to step you through just briefly on the history of our financial plans and some of the numbers that you may recall from our past presentations, and then enter into sort of a hypothetical discussion on what those impacts have been. So let's start in 2018. In September of 2018, when we developed the assumptions for our financial plan. At that point, we were looking at rate increases through 2025 about 7.2% per year, and we were prepared for that. And then in May of 2019, based on being selected to have our WIFIA loan, we were able to calculate that because the borrowing, the finance terms, not just the interest rate, but the financial terms of that loan were so favorable that allowed us to structure our finances in a way more advantageous for our customers. So we were able to bring those rates down. And then you might remember that in September of that year, when we actually adopted the rates, the rate increases themselves were at 3.6%. The difference between the 3.9% and the 3.6% was based on the interest rates that we actually achieved with the WIFI loan. When we were doing our May 2019 analysis, we didn't have the way the WIFI loan works. You don't know the specific interest rate until the day you close. We were looking at an interest rate about 3.5% in the model just to make sure that we had enough headroom, and we lowered it down to about 3.25%. And then when we closed, we actually closed at 2.39%. So you can see that had a small adjustment in the rates themselves. Now at this point, we're moving into hypothetical land. The next one is what we've done with the help of Joe Healy, who's on the call here as well, is we went back to the financial plan that was calibrated through that 3.6% rate increase. And we said, if we knew then what we know now about those lower revenues, so we kept all the other assumptions the same. The WIFI interest rate that we actually had was in there, and all the other assumptions on fund balances and cash and all those details. But we just had this lower revenue. What would it do? And it would have increased our rates to the 6.5% number that you see there. And that was the impact of the lower water cells. And then to that, since March, we had the COVID crisis hit us. That was a further hit to our revenues and increased that to 8.4%. After the COVID, though, you might remember that we did re-execute our WIFI loan, where we brought the interest rate down from 2.39% to 1.35%. And that brought the rate increases down a little bit as well. You might say, well, wait a minute, that's a pretty big reduction in interest rates. Why didn't it have more of an impact on the rates themselves? And it's, again, the way that the WIFI loan is structured, it really is going to be beneficial in those years when we're paying the money back to the EPA. But that's after 2028. So after 2027, in 2028, that we'll start making those debt service payments. So the real benefit of the WIFIA really was achieved when we got down to 3.9%, and that allowed us to change the structure of our debt. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Tom.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So what we wanted to do, and hopefully that made sense, is we really wanted to show how did these rates change up to the point that we're at today, and then we're going to continue that through this presentation of how do these things change the rates, and that were these big issues change rates. So the 5 major themes for the coming biennium, you've seen these before. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. And within those, in just a few minutes, you'll see another slide that has all of the initiatives that are embedded within each of these themes. But the first one there is the human investment. We want to make sure our employees are set up to be successful, to meet the future requirements of the district. So that's training, different types of training that we're looking at doing. Intergovernmental relations, we've talked about that. This is a position that the district used to have. You'll see I'm not looking to fill a position, but I am looking to utilize some outside resources to help us for the next couple of years in working with our within the governmental relations within the community and even within the state, and possibly even at the federal level to see if we can't possibly get more money if there's some type of infrastructure bill that comes out. And then business intelligence. This is really looking at where we have a lot of disparate data throughout the district, and really creating owners of the data, putting it in a single place, and making it so it's a lot easier to access, utilize. Right now, it's a bit of a challenge for our staff to do that. And then efficiency through modernization. So looking at how do we modernize our processes or anything else that we're doing to make us a little more efficient. And there's opportunity to do that. And last but not least is the current initiatives. So we want to be successful in executing what we've already started on. So the WWSP, WWSS, and the CIS are some of the major ones, along with replacing or dealing with some of our critical infrastructure within the district. So those are the 5 major themes. Go ahead, Paul. So we thought we would start, so Paul left off with kind of where things are at before we do anything. And, you know, we're currently sitting in this situation where we were looking at about an 8% rate increase. I'm going to let Paul explain why this goes down, but I will explain that when we actually apply our initiatives, it's at 7.5%. And if we don't do any of the initiatives, if we take all of those initiatives that we have, we take them off the table, other than the one to continue with the current stuff that we're already doing, that would get us down to around 7%. So you can see that the initiatives, they don't have a huge impact. There's an impact, but it's not a big one. And that's an estimated impact. But it gives you some idea. And I will tell you, I do feel, and we'll talk about these in a moment, that the initiatives are pretty critical for positioning us better in the future, to be in a better position than where we're currently at today. So I'm going to quickly ask Paul to step back in here. And so, Paul, can you explain, because I know this is a question, how we go from 8 to 7.5 while we add initiatives?
You bet, Tom. So the 8% was that hypothetical that was based on the prior financial plan with all the assumptions that were in that financial plan. We wanted to keep those assumptions constant so we could trace through how the revenue impacts affected our financial plan. But then when we start the financial planning process again for fiscal year 2021, Joe and I go through the financial planning process and we retune it up to the new starting point. So we look at things like fund balances, we examine revenue. So one of the things that I talked about is how revenues have affected our demands, and that's a moving target. And as we're looking at revenues now, some of the early revenues have sort of solidified. And you probably noticed if you looked in the month in review for the last several months, things have solidified. So our forecast of where revenues are going to be at the end of the fiscal year is no longer in the 12.5 million range. It's closer to the $8 million range in terms of shortfall for the biennium. So when we take all those things into account and we gear up the financial plan for the new planning horizon, that gives us that 7.5% rate increase. And as Tom indicated, when we eliminate the initiatives, this sounds like it's a pretty easy thing to do, but the initiatives come in flavors and they have different timings and different impacts depending on the timing of the initiatives. So it's somewhere, the impact would be somewhere between that 7 and 7.5% range would be the impact, but it's not necessarily, it wouldn't necessarily get us exactly to the 7% number if we eliminated all the initiatives, because some of these things are correlated and work together. So Tom, does that get us where we want to go?
That's perfect. So why don't we take a look at the initiatives here? Go to the next slide. So this is a table that you've seen last time. We've made some slight modifications here, and I'm gonna hit on these, and then I'll invite staff to give a brief statement on each of these. But under mission, vision, and values, over the next 2 years, we're saying about $290,000. That's obviously not all for just mission, vision, and values. We're looking at about $52,000 for the next 2 years for bringing in someone to help us develop a district-wide set of mission, vision, and values. And then the DISC training is something we were working on, as many of you may recall, and COVID hit, and we want to continue that training and embedding it into our culture. So about $40,000 a year and that's for district-wide all staff training on that front. And then implement a DEI initiative. And I'm going to invite our HR director, Amy Blue, to just chime in here and just give us a quick brief on this. Amy? I heard you for just a moment there, Amy. I guess maybe you're having some audio challenges here, so I'll just jump in on this.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. I'm echoing. Let me hang up here. All right. You can hear me?
We can hear you.
Yep,
Yes.
we hear you now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. Oh gosh. Anyways, with regards to DEI, first order of business would be for us to hire a consultant to go over all our personnel policies and hiring procedures and practices with a DEI lens. And then depending on how much money is approved in the budget, the next step will be for the consultant to work with each department manager on how to incorporate DEI in their strategic plan. And I'm not sure in what order things will get done or if work will be done simultaneously, but we would like help forming a DEI committee and a DEI action plan moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
So the next piece is the class comp strategy. And this is one that we feel pretty strongly we need to move forward on over the course of the next 2 years and work with all staff, all management to get this done. This is going to be a pretty comprehensive comp study that we want to do here. We believe it's critical for us to be in a position to respond to our customers about, where we're at in terms of, how do we compare? And I think it's important for us to be able to speak to our partners in our programs that we're working on together and be able to talk to them about where we're at with our comp study. But it's also about being fair to our own employees and making sure we're in the right spot and fairly compensating. Amy, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. Just engaging a consultant to do the study to make sure we're competitive with the market. Perfect.
So then next is the government affairs. Again, the bulk of this is utilizing an outside consultant for the next couple of years to help us get through this and not hire the position internal until we're in a better financial position. But this is a pretty critical, in my opinion, position for making sure that we are effectively communicating with our partnering agencies, but also working with state agencies and then again at the federal level, especially since there's opportunities for funding that is looking like it will come out at some point during this administration. So we want to be in a strong position to, craft that if we can and capture any money there. I will remind you that the prior government affairs position that we had, he played a critical role in helping get and shape the WIFIA fund that we've been utilizing today. So it is a pretty critical position, and it can be a source of significant revenue to us when we work effectively with that. And then we want to also use some new survey tools to work with our customers and understand, what are we meeting our customers' needs and expectations? What is it that our customers, really want? And I think it will be it makes it more effective for both the board and the district to be able to respond to any customer concerns when we know what they are very clearly. And the other part of that is also doing internal surveying with our staff to understand and create a baseline of where staff at, and are we moving up or down year to year in terms of how well our staff are doing. So that category there is about 363,000 over the next couple of years. And then the business decision data, I'm going to ask Tim Boylan, our IT director, to step in here and talk about these.
Great, thanks, Tom. Good evening, commissioners. Over the past couple bienniums, the district has invested a number of resources and time into programs and projects to get our technology infrastructure and systems up to speed and ready to go to provide key data for decision making. This initiative and this theme takes those individual data sources and gives us a platform where we can now start developing more robust decision making through an integrated view across our data. So for example, we can combine data out of our operational systems like our SCADA systems with data out of our financial system and data out of our work order system to get a more robust picture of the cost, effort, and maintenance of the system. So this business decision data is divided into three separate sections. The first step is really developing a data warehouse, a cohesive data management infrastructure that allows us to store data from disparate systems in a central location that we can mine and take action on. The second piece of that is to move forward with dashboarding technologies and business requirements analysis that allow us to pull specific data and portray them in a way that makes it self-service, easy to consume, and provides utility both for decision makers and operations teams on a day-to-day basis. And then finally, once we have those pieces in play, we need to take a full comprehensive look at our data or our decision processes so that we can draw them into the realm of using actionable data day to day as opposed to historical data, where we can see in real time what's going on, we can make decisions and then even do projections into the future. So this entire group of projects is really about leveraging all the good work over the past number of years to bring data into more actionable decision-making processes.
Thank you, Tim. And then on modernization, that's the largest of the ones of the first five groups there. It's the largest, but I'm gonna start with Andrew and have him explain, our customer service manager, explain about AMI and what we're talking about doing there in these first 2 years.
Okay, well, thanks, Tom. Well, first, AMI stands for Automated Metering Infrastructure. Currently, the district relies primarily on manual meter reading. We also have for about 35% of our meters AMR, which is automated meter reading, which is drive-by. But AMI is a technology that allows you to get real-time data from the meter back to the water district. So before I get into the rest of it, just to give you a sense of TVWD meters, about 43% are more than 20 years old. An additional 12% are between 15 and 20 years old. So we've got over half of our meters that are at least 15, if not 20 years old. So, and right now we run to fail on meters except for new installs, primarily for new development. If the district would implement AMR or AMI, excuse me, it's a logical meter to cash modernization effort, not dissimilar that many utilities are taking, as fewer are relying on manual reading. It's a greater efficiency in reading. Importantly, for both customers and the utility, they both benefit from real-time data. On the customer side, we definitely receive feedback from customers. It's something they're interested in. One example of how they can benefit is if there is a leak, they can get a notification of abnormal consumption. Another real benefit for both customers and TVWD would be the ability to implement true monthly billing. It's really the way for us to get to monthly billing, which is something that the Rate Advisory Committee recommended a couple of years ago. But we need to have a new CIS before we would get to AMI. Fortunately, the product we selected for our CIS has the meter data management software built into it. It's a holistic solution, so that's good news. But it's a large project. It's a significant project, but definitely with customer benefits and utility benefits. I know Tom had experience in Bend of seeing the benefits for the system itself, and maybe Tom, you could say something about that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So yeah, I mean, one of the things that we were successful there with is we did this kind of early work that what you see here that's represented in that first 107,000. And what it allowed us to do is actually go after grant funding under energy efficiency. And the city of Bend was successful in getting that. At least a portion of the project was covered by grant funding, and the rest was covered under the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act. And I think Gresham was the only other one that did the same thing at the same time. And I will also share just kind of looking out on the horizon, which is what I've asked all of our leadership team to do when we're putting this together, is, kind of look down the road a little further. And I was on a call today with people from Japan, Singapore, Taiwan, Australia, London, and I think Germany, and then as well as a number of people from across the US. And what we were talking about and seeing is where hydraulic modeling of water systems is headed, not just water systems, but sewerage systems. Clean Water Service was on this call as well. And what they're talking about is utilizing AMI in these systems for better demand management. So when I look down the horizon out 5-10 years, this is going to be a growing thing, and this is really just taking the first steps to put us in the right spot, hopefully to capture money if money becomes available. And then the next two on the list there, project management and asset management. I'm going to ask Carrie Pack, our chief engineer, to talk to those very briefly.
So on the project management side, as the district or the board knows that we've been working on delivering CIP projects on a regular basis. And what we're talking about doing with the Project Management Center is actually getting folks trained in the PMI, Project Management Institute form of project management, and moving more towards a professional way of developing project management skills. So we've identified some folks that are eligible to take the test and also introduce the professional skills that are necessary to bring the projects on time, on budget, on schedule, and to the quality that we all have been expecting to, or have learned to expect. And So some of the costs that you see are for not only for training, but also for starting to investigate on bring together some cost accounting and project management software tools that are necessary for us to kind of move into the 21st century of doing project management. So that's included in there. And also but for the, moving on to the next bullet down, the asset management program, this initiative is actually already started. We issued a request for qualification today, in fact, to bring on a consultant team to help us set up a asset management program. So we have the CMMS, computer maintenance management system, computerized maintenance management system, forgot what the acronym stands for, to help us with the inventory and work order system for managing our operations. But the entire asset management program is really looking at more than just doing the inventory and the work plan or work orders, but really looking at how to manage all of our assets in a way that is going to help us develop a level of service and the cost of services that are associated with that, and looking at doing our work a little bit more associated with the drivers that that are expected. So, for example, we have flushing programs throughout the district, and right now we seek to flush all of our system within 3 years frequency. Unfortunately, with the workload and everything, we're achieving about 5 to 6 year frequency of flushing our system. We need to step back and look at, what do we do flushing anyway? It's to improve water quality. How do we achieve water quality? And so we're using some smart way or different ways of thinking about how we go about doing our business so that we achieve our operations and maintenance goals based on the drivers for those activities that are embedded into our work. So those are activities that we're starting. If we don't get the, all of the funding that we've identified, doesn't mean that we're not going to move forward with these programs. It'll just be on a different schedule and level of effort. So.
Thank you, Carrie. So I'm gonna, the first 5 groups there that we just went through, I'm gonna remind the board that when we showed the prior slide, those 5 groups in total have an impact on rates of about 0.5%. So that's some of the commissioners had asked for us to be able to identify to a little bit finer level what each of these, what impact each of these have. What I found is there's a limit to how hard I can push my finance staff through a holiday weekend. And frankly, through the holidays, we've been working very hard on this. And we couldn't get to that level of detail in time. But on a larger scale, those first 5 have about 0.5% impact on rates. So I'm gonna jump down to the next one, because that is where really the big rate drivers are, and that's in existing initiatives. And obviously, we are committed to implementing the WWSS and moving forward with that work. We know that has to be done, and the importance of that. But that is really the thing that is driving our rates more than anything else. It is the expenditures of the funds there that are really driving our rates as we move forward. Then the other thing below that is that doesn't really have a cost impact, but developing the plan for the wind down of the PMO. We have very talented staff, and we want to retain and integrate them back into TVWD. And so that's what that piece is for. It's more of a labor intensive piece. And then we're already under contract and already underway for the implementation of CIS. Hopefully about 12 months from now, we will be going live. So that's where we're at in that. And so that's not one we have a lot of flexibility to change or slow down on. The next one is the investment in critical infrastructure. And Carrie's team has really done incredible work. I really can't say enough. I've been pressuring them a lot and really pushing them outside any comfort zone to push out and delay projects, but not put us in any unnecessary risk situation. And they have done that, and really one of the most critical investments that in terms of dollar size that we need to make there is in the Taylor's Ferry reservoirs. We've kidded around about seismic grade paint, but they really are tanks that need to be addressed and be dealt with. And you'll see here in just a little bit that we, just for experiment purposes, said, okay, well, what happens if we push that project out? Well, you'll see here, Braylee, one thing that happens is we increase our risk, but that also doesn't have a dramatic impact on rates. It does have some, but it's not as much as what anyone might think. And then the last two there, the TVWD branding strategy, that's that was something that the prior CEO, Mark Knudsen, thought was important. I agree that it is important, but it needs to go hand in hand with the survey work, as well as the mission, vision, and values work. That all ties together. So that's a continuation and integrated into that work. And then lastly, currently we have two file structures called SharePoint, and where people store their digital information, and where the district is storing digital information. And we currently are running two different versions of this, and we really need to get rid of one of them and move to another. It's not a cost issue, but it is a resource issue. It's about staff looking at what's in their particular drives and taking the time to look to, do we need to keep it? If not, where's it go? Where do we archive it? Those kinds of things. So let's, unless the board would like to spend any time talking about these individually, which we're happy to do, it might be helpful to get a little further so that we can see the bigger picture on the rates. And I'll leave it to the board's pleasure if you have any questions at this point, or we can keep moving on.
I really appreciate all the work that all the staff have done on this. It's really, for me, it's hugely valuable information to know. Gosh, we've got all these different initiatives, but all of them taken together only move the needle maybe 0.5%. So should we spend a whole bunch of time talking about that? I personally don't think so. I think we should move on to the big things that do move the needle a little bit. And I would welcome any other commissioner input on this.
Yeah, this is Todd, and what I wanted to say was thank you to Tom and his staff, because I'm the one that had asked for kind of that placeholder initiative slide that showed the 8%, 7.5%, and 7% numbers, and the turnaround on that was less than a week. So I recognize the effort that you had to put in to kind of meet my request, and I just wanted to take a second to say thank you and acknowledge all the must have been a weekend of hard work to accomplish that.
It was, and I'm not going to take any credit, Commissioner Sanders. It was our financial team. All I had to do was stand by my phone and once in a while take a call and answer questions. So they're phenomenal. And yeah, they worked clean through the whole weekend, but thank you.
Well, I'm sorry that
Paul.
they did, but Commissioner Sanders, it was a great question. But I will never forget when I was CFO and we had a board member just calmly announce, waving her hands at the time, well, why don't we just have Bernice run all possible scenarios? And I remember sitting there thinking, well, that would be quite a lot of scenarios now, wouldn't it? And so there are times when the board needs to hear, you know what, we can spend a whole bunch more time on this, but not moving the needle, not probably a good use of our time.
So not hearing any further questions on this, I'm going to continue to move along. It does not mean we can't come back and revisit this. So some risks to consider. Even though Carrie and her team has done their best to balance risks and put the most critical infrastructure to be funded here fairly soon, it's still there's a little bit of risk there that we're taking, and we still could have other major facilities that could fail sooner than what we had anticipated. So that is a risk we're taking. There are cost impacts of delaying any investments, whether that be in our existing infrastructure replacement or to the WWSP. And then operational risks, we really need to consider the effectiveness of our operations. This is really looking at how do we take what we have and work more efficiently with what we've got, and not just for now, but into the future. Obviously, if we don't, we remain in a situation where it's more labor and staff intensive. There's potential for declining service levels, but I want to be clear about something to anyone listening as well as to the board. What we will not risk is meeting any of the federal requirements, and not just meeting but exceeding. We will not risk any public health. We will not risk any water quality. Those things will not happen. So when we talk about declining service levels, we're talking about things about maybe not being quite as quick to respond as what we would like, or are in a situation today to, let's say, the installation of a new service line. And then preparation for the WWSS. We are putting together plans right now for what's it going to take to operate. But right now we don't know for sure. They're plans. And so we could find that we need more resource staff than what we had originally thought, or sooner than what we had thought. So there's a bit of a risk there. And then a big one here is, especially over just the next 2 years, especially, while there's not a heavy lift necessarily financially with those initiatives, there is it's resource intensive in terms of staff time. As I mentioned, the simple thing of just getting down to a single SharePoint file system. We can't bring anybody else in from the outside to look at our files and tell us, hey, these files need to be stored here. That's something that we've got to take staff time to do and look at. A lot of these things that we're talking about in terms of business process efficiencies, those take time. Oh, we disappeared there, Paul. Hopefully Paul will come back.
Yeah, somebody took my presentation away. Let's see. We'll get it back here.
Okay, so so I just want to yeah, perfect. That was quick, Paul. Good job. Yeah, and so those are operational risks I want to hit on. One of the things that we did is, and I've shared with a few of you individually, frankly, there isn't a door we haven't opened, looked behind, a table we haven't looked underneath, to look for where could we cut, what else could we do? And one of the things that I asked the finance team to do is to consider the assumptions that they use in the financial planning model. And you know, there's a danger there in the assumptions they use if they go too high or too low. But I ask that they take a look at those to make sure that they're being reasonable. And I'm going to turn this back over to Paul right now so he can talk about that.
Thank you, Tom. So certainly one of the things we are concerned about is future revenues. I indicated a bit ago when we kicked up this year's financial planning process, we did that reset from that 8% to 7.5%. That's based on our understanding that some of the weakness in our revenue has abated somewhat, and as well as interest rates. Right now, interest rates are at a very low level, and that's in our financial plan reflects that. But interest rates can go up, especially if something happens in the economy, especially something along the lines of some sort of inflationary pressure would have a quick impact on interest rates. So as we consider these risks, and in the next slide we'll get more into how we structured the financial plan to address these risks and to look at those. But it's important for us to reflect on if our revenue estimates are too low, and we bring that information to you, and we ask you to make tough decisions with information that's too low, that could be damaging, as well as if our estimates are too high. So we're trying to bring the best numbers that we can to you, but they are subject to those external things that we don't control, things like COVID and the economy. So I just want to make that point. And then, Tom, back to you. Tom, you're muted if you're speaking.
I was speaking, and I was so eloquent. So the infrastructure risk. So we already talked a little bit about delaying a project like Taylor's Reservoir. And we're going to show here in a moment how much that impacts, but it doesn't have a big rate impact, just a little less than 0.5%. But what it does is we increase risk if we were to push that out. So that's a risk. The other one to consider is delaying of PLW 2.0. This is the pipeline for the WWSP, and I'm grossly oversimplifying here, Dave, but going from Miller Hill out to the Sunset Highway, essentially. And you know, this is really one of the elements that we could do without for a number of years without any risk to our operations. And certainly Carrie can speak to that, but that's one of the options we have. You know, but we still have work to do if the board wants to go in that direction. One of the big things that we got to do is find out about WIFIA, which Paul talks about here in a moment. Operational risks. there's reduction in operating expenses and capacity. So this is really, looking at, well, what else can we cut in terms of, what we're doing with staff, not adding staff. And it's putting our staff in a situation where they're doing more with less is what it comes down to. And then delay in filling any certain vacant positions. I think the board's aware there were 2 higher level positions in the current budget that have remained unfilled, that were part of the WWSS. We did not feel like we needed them right now, and frankly, it was a good call because it would have impacted our budget and put us in a worse situation. And then Paul, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about the financial risks.
Yes. So on the assumption on revenues, and again, as finance people, CFO types are the kind of people who look both ways before crossing a one-way street. We're by nature conservative individuals when it comes to these matters, but that may not serve the district entirely well. So we need to balance that and present the risks to our policymakers for your consideration. So we are looking at the financial assumptions that we have within the model on future revenue. The other thing we're looking at, these are a lot of words here, but our borrowings compared to the revenue available to pay debt, something that we call our net leverage, if we want to get technical. But it's a financial metric that there are a couple of financial metrics that we have in the model. One is debt service coverage, which you've probably all heard. The other one is net leverage, which we haven't talked with you as much about. That really is the binding constraint. And we're looking at allowing that to exceed sort of the most desirable levels for a few years as we get through that borrowing. We do that with a sense of caution because, again, we could have another slowdown in the economy. We could take another hit. And when we make these financial assumptions, and if we take a more riskier stance on that, it's not as if the risk goes away. We've just moved it from an infrastructure risk or an operational risk into a financial risk. So it doesn't go away, it just moves over into a different column. And then our options become less, we're more limited if we have these financial risks and we come to the board saying, this is the predicament we're in. We need to increase rates absolutely in order to meet our financial commitments. So these assumptions, they're easy for us to make within a spreadsheet. Well, they're easier for Mr. Healy to make within a spreadsheet, but they do really have some long-term ramifications, and we rely on our professional judgment as well as conversations that we have with some of the investment bankers and our municipal advisors as we consult on these matters. And then the last one we have here is WIFIA, and especially if we are talking about changing a program element like PLW 2.0, we need to make sure that that complies with the WIFIA requirement. You might remember that when we were awarded the WIFIA loan, it was based on a scope of work, a budget, and a schedule that we were going to meet. And so we would need to have a conversation with WIFIA to see, with the WIFIA program, to see how any change of this nature might affect the WIFIA loan, and we haven't done that. Tom? Oh, actually, I'm going to keep going. I'm sorry.
Yes.
So any questions about that? Let's talk about what we've learned now as we go forward into the financial forecast. So as you saw when we talked about the forecast at the beginning of the presentation, we ended the last model at 8%. We started this new modeling effort at 7.5%. If we were to delay the PLW 2.0 project by 10 years, that could shave 1.5% off of that ask down to 6%. We also have various scenarios, operating scenarios that we talked to the department managers, and they came up with different budgets based on their ability to shift or eliminate costs for a period of time. Most of these costs aren't permanent. You can kind of hold your breath for a couple of years, but you can't do it for 4 years. So those result in very little savings, actually, in the scheme of things. You can see it goes from 6% to 5.8%. And then the big one at the end here is the one I talked about, which is loosening those financial assumptions. Basically, becoming a little bit more financial risky in our capital structure in particular by borrowing more money and becoming more debt laden. And that brings that financial risk back to us. But we'd be relaxing the financial planning assumptions. And when you look at that, that's actually added back in those operational savings that we talked about. So with that, we have a summary table here that presents a little bit more detail of the various scenarios that we looked at and how they decompose themselves. We present the rate, the forecast of changes, and those are assumed for the 4-year period between 2022 and 2025. So it would be annually, each year during that period of time. It's not a one-time thing, it's a four-time thing over that 4 years. And you can see then what would happen to the typical monthly bill. And that's the standard typical monthly bill that we use, which is 7 CCF of water per month, 14 over a 2-month period. And you can see what would happen to the typical bills versus where we would start in 2021 at the $75.23. So I'm going to leave this slide up here and see if there are any questions about the information we presented.
Yeah, and before we get to questions, one of the things that so you can see the range there, somewhere between 5 and 7.5%. What I want to make clear is, let's say the board says, look, we want to do the 7.5%. I'm not suggesting that's what the board's going to pick, but just it's at the top. What I want to make clear is the WWSP, as it continues on, it's going in the next phases it's going into, which are the construction phases. Those are going to be much more difficult to constrain. And it's not unreasonable to assume that those costs are going to go up over the next 5 years to some degree. You earlier tonight approved the ENR adjustment to our SDCs, which was 6%. I think last year it was over 4%. So, certainly the WWSP staff is doing all they can for cost controls, but there's still risk there that those costs could go up. And so what I'm talking about here is we need to get ourselves some, I guess, financial capacity to weather some future changes, so we aren't in a situation where some elements of the projects come in terms of cost higher, and we don't really have the ability to not do them or scale them back. It's hard to scale back critical, pipeline that's connecting, the tanks to the treatment plant, for instance. You got to do it. So I just want to lay out that we need, when the board's deliberating on these rates, I ask that you please think about that financial capacity element as well, so that we aren't in a situation in the future where we're coming back saying, yeah, these costs went up and we're in a tougher spot. So with that, I think we've covered it pretty thoroughly, and I would love to hear from the board on what can we provide, what can we do to provide clarity, is there questions we can answer, and ultimately where does the board feel most comfortable with in terms of rates over the next couple of years?
Tom, I have 2 more slides I want to hit.
I'm sorry. Yes.
No, that's okay. And these are my weasel words. So back in March of 2019, I had a similar slide to this, and I want to make sure that we cover this, because going on what Tom just said there, you know, if the rate increases that we have now are low, we've taken basically all of our quivers out of our, or all of our arrows out of our quiver, and we simply have fewer options. But these risks, I'm not going to go through each one of them here because they're going to be familiar to you, but they're very real. On the revenue side, you know, the revenues and the recovery rate of that's really important. And then on the financing side, if we do find ourselves in a difficult revenue situation and we're not able to meet our metrics, then we could see a loss in our credit quality, which would then cause not just you know, when we talk about interest rates going up, it could be because the market interest rates go up, but in addition to that, you can have a credit quality, which means your individual interest rates are going up because you're a less desirable borrower. And that would increase our cost of capital and not serve our customers well. And then the last item there is the WIFIA compliance. And with that, Tom, we'll turn it back to you to talk about the last 2 risks.
Yes, so I already talked about the construction project risk, potential inflation. We are, with all of our projects, we're doing all we can to contain any project scope. I think we've done both with Carrie's group and with Dave's group. I think we've done a really phenomenal job in keeping our project scopes under control. But those other 2 are a little more difficult to control. And then, you know, this is the operational. It's a risk because we are going to look to delay hiring till we need it, and we're making assumptions on the kind of staffing levels we're going to need. But you know, we could find out that we need to do more sooner, and so there's a bit of a risk there that could change some of the numbers we've shown you. And of course, then the unplanned investment in a major facility. So a failure that we have not anticipated could happen, and we would be required to expend significant funds to deal with that. So those are the risks. There are opportunities. There's some positive ones. So one is there's a really, I think, a growing potential for low interest or grants for in-district CIP. So that could help us. In fact, Carrie's group is doing some of the work on this now to see if there isn't some opportunity to get some WIFIA funding for some of our internal infrastructure stuff, our in-district CIP. So that might, in a couple of years, put us in a better position to bring some of these projects forward that we're currently pushing out. Certainly value engineering. Dave's team is doing this. The WWSS management team has been kind of putting him and his team through the ringer on this a bit, and asking him to do some value engineering and looking at what can be done, where can we save costs. But as you can see, if the goal here is to get risks down, frankly, shifting hundreds of thousands of dollars doesn't really shift much. In fact, even in the tens of millions, doesn't shift it much. You know, we're talking about really big swings in order to change rates. And then we are looking at project scope reductions and phasing. So we are looking at those opportunities and what they would mean in terms of rates. But there are some contractual elements to this that it could put us in a tough position. So what I'm talking about there is So let's say we run a scenario where we say, well, gee, if we could push the costs out on this element of the project out further, and I'm talking about the WWSP, well, then we put ourselves in a position that, well, now we've got more money that we're spending with Portland Water Bureau. There's more times with the more time with the PMO office, so you're paying for that staff. It's one of those situations you can spend, $2 million to save $2 million. So we need to be careful about that. But we are looking at which ones might make sense. We are looking at partnerships with neighboring utilities. We're having some early conversations with some of our neighboring utilities to see if we can't get them interested in now, and many of them are interested in partnering now because they're in a different position than they were a few years ago with us on the WWSP. So we're looking at how that could impact things, but obviously to any extent we get that, that helps us and helps ease our rate burden on our customers. And then, of course, we all hope for the revenues to recover faster than what we anticipated, and that the economy will do better than what we anticipate. So those are all, positive risks is the category we'd like to put them on. So at this point now, we would like to turn it over, and President Bagnall, we're here to answer questions, and how can we help best facilitate and guide the decision from here?
Well, I think this has been tremendously useful information, and I personally am hearing a lot of pretty strong advice to not lowball it and hope for the best, mainly because the biggest things that are driving our costs in the near term are things like the Willamette Water Supply Project, and that's an area where we have not a lot of flexibility. So if we guess and we guess wrong, we're in a world of hurt. I find this very useful, and I'm disappointed that we are looking at higher rate increases than we had anticipated at a time when our customers are enduring some hardships. But at the same time, I don't think our customers are well served by us making unrealistic decisions, and as I said before, hoping for the best. I'd be interested to hear from other commissioners your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, this is Dick. I would agree with that. There are a lot of families now that are hurting, but at the same time, that 4.9%, I don't think is viable. I would maybe go with the delay PLW2 and then charge 6%, but that's about as much as I'd be willing to go at the moment.
Hi, this is Todd, and my question is, do we have to make a decision today?
I'm going to ask Paul that question, and I believe the answer is no. I believe we have some time here, but Paul, could you weigh in on that?
Yes.
But I just one Paul knows me. I can't resist weighing in on this too. If the board were feeling, if the majority of the board were feeling strongly that, oh my God, we have to try and stay as low as we can possibly be, that would be a pretty important signal to give district staff now today, because they are embroiled already in budget preparation, and to get to a low ball number is going to require a whole different level of effort than would be the case if the board is willing to entertain higher rate increases than we were discussing last year. Is that right, Paul?
Yeah, President Bagnall, that is correct. But we do have time in our schedule. We've given ourselves time to come back at the February work session and answer questions that you may have. Our goal would be to have the board select a strategy at the February regular meeting, and then for us to formally finish the financial plan that we would bring for your approval at the March regular meeting. Having said that, if we get a general direction of where we're going, I think that we can continue to do investigations on these topics, but we would like to get a sense of where you're going. But certainly we've got the ability to come back at the February work session and answer questions that you might have, and get those on the record.
Thank you. Commissioners Duggan and Doan, would you care to weigh in on this?
Well, this is Jim Doan, and I can live with 6. I could live with 7.5 if we really absolutely positively had to do it. But I think 6 is, 6, 6 isn't that much different than 4.9. It's what, $3 a month? I just, and then I don't even feel bad about 7.5. Of course, it largely depends on what we get from the budget committee. And I think we need to do another rate committee to see what the general consensus of our constituents, especially the advocates for low-income people, have to say. But if it's 7.5, it's 7.5. It's $3 between 4.9 and 6. Okay, and it's another $4 between 6 and 7.5. So that's a total of $7. I just don't see that as a huge big issue.
Well, and you also have to reflect that, as painful as rate increases are, easing them in over a couple of years is always better than slamming people with double digits because you failed to plan ahead. That's the definition of rate shock, and people don't like it. Commissioner Duggan, I hope I didn't interrupt you. Are you ready to weigh in?
Yes, I concur with what I've heard. If I were to say what I'm most comfortable with today, given all the different balancing of rationale, I would say the 6.0 seems to be the sweet spot. But I could be convinced to go for 7.5. I think anything less than 6.0, we're losing too much, and we're not really doing justice to what needs to be done. So I again, just to sum it up, I'm comfortable with the 6.0 right now.
Thank you. And Commissioner Sanders, aside from your question about do we have to decide tonight, do you have any number you're leaning toward?
Well, what I would say is that relaxed financial assumptions and additional savings for me are ether in the air and could be, could not be, and aren't necessarily two activities, tasks, goals, or intentions that I want the district to spend time figuring out. The questions, or the question that I really want to ask is, if we delay PLW 2.0 for 10 years, other than the savings that we would incur now, what is the long-term benefit, or what is the benefit of pushing that off 10 years? And in 10 years from now, if I'm still on the board and I plan on, running again, do I look back and say, in 2021, I made a mistake by saying, let's postpone PLW 2.0 for a $4 a month, 40, almost $50 for a year in water rate savings for the customers? So that would be a question that I'll be forwarding on to Tom to get answered by, whomever in his staff is the best to answer that. But it'd be the question of, is it worth delaying PLW 2.0 for this $4 savings?
So I think we're prepared to answer that to some degree. And I'd really turn that over to our chief engineer, Carrie Pack. Carrie, could you answer that to what we understand today?
So are you talking about from the water supply perspective, Commissioner Sanders? I'm just trying to answer your question.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, if we push this off, and I guess the initial number is a decade, do we come back in 10 years and go, wow, we shouldn't have pushed that off 10 years? Are we really sorry we did that?
So from the water demand and water supplies perspectives, we're still doing all the numbers because we just got some of the information most recently. We don't really need the water from PLW 2.0 connection, which will be at the Corn Pass and Highway 26 at the very northern end of the WWSP, until many, many years later. I don't have that exact number yet in terms of whether it's 10 years or 20 years. I'm pretty comfortable in, we're running the models right now to check and see where our demand is going to be in 10 years. I'm pretty comfortable in saying that we're not going to be needing that water at that point for at least 10 years, if not a little bit longer. Largely, what we really need from WWSP is we need the MPE completed, and we need the connection at 209th and Farmington completed. So we have 3 turnouts, MPE, 209th and Farmington, and one at the terminus of PLW 2.0, again at Corn Pass and Highway 26. So as long as we get those other 2 turnouts completed before 2026, I'm pretty comfortable in saying that we're not going to be needing that amount of water for a while. Does that help your question?
Yes, thank you. Can I follow up with, will the design that's in place now then be usable? Do we have to restart, re-permit, kind of get the wheel rolling again, huge initial startup costs, etc. If we postpone it? Sounds like what we're really doing is postponing it about 6 years or so, and then starting up a construction process again to be ready for implementation in 10 years.
And Dave's probably a better person to answer the question, but from a permitting standpoint, you definitely are going to have to restart the permitting. So Dave, I'll pass the baton to you.
Cool. Thanks, Carrie. Let's see. So, yeah, there would be some rework, primarily permitting and real estate. There's in order to get PLW2 done, there's a lot of permanent and temporary easements that we're negotiating right now. And in particular, the temporary easements are commitments from us to the landowners that we just need this a certain amount of land temporarily while we're constructing this, and we're going to construct it starting here and ending at this time, and then we'll be gone. And so if we were to delay this project, we would have to reevaluate all of that, redo a lot of it at the time when we were to go forward with constructing the project. So I think that answers maybe the latter part of your question, Commissioner Sanders. The earlier part of your Commissioner Sanders, the earlier part of your question, Commissioner Sanders, was very interesting and difficult to answer. You asked the question, will I be upset or mad at myself for making a decision now to delay a project to do 10 years later? Will I look back on that as that being a bad decision? And that's really hard to answer. It depends on your, what we consider a good or bad decision. As Carrie mentioned, technically this is possible. Technically we can do this. The system can survive from a water supply standpoint, and we can build this later. Building it later, though, will cost more. Escalation is real, and so it will cost more to build it in the future. And, things will continue to develop. And so traffic impacts will be more significant, and things like that will make it more difficult to build the project in the future. Plus, it'll be a one-off project as opposed to part of everything else that we're doing in the program. So that makes it a little bit more cumbersome as well. So it's not an easy call. This is you're dealing in the world of uncertainty right here, and it's kind of going on a gut, but it can be done. As Carrie pointed out, the system can survive without this chunk of pipe. We can build it later. It's just going to take some challenges to overcome. Hope that helps.
If I could
and you
just
could
add
also
one,
be dealing with different owners, couldn't you? And starting all over with negotiating easements and all that sort of thing.
Yes.
I was just going to add one more thing that I didn't mention. Again, technically, we don't necessarily need the water supply from the demand standpoint. Operationally, it would be tremendously helpful to have this pipe, just because of the mixture of water coming in from different directions and whatnot. All of the integration work that we've been doing has been with the idea that this water is going to be available in 2026. So just from that, I'll just add that point also.
Looks like Commissioner Duggan has his hand up.
Yes, I just had a follow-up question, and I think you kind of hit on it, Carrie, as well. Operationally, it would be advantageous to have it. Would it also be advantageous to the city of Hillsborough, and or Beaverton through the other emergency interconnects, and will they be disappointed if this doesn't go forward as originally scheduled? As part of the WWSP because of the side benefits to our partners.
And I'll just start, and then I can pass the baton to Tom, but because Tom's been having, I think, more conversations on that side. But I do know that, as Dave knows, there are several turnouts from TV Highway on north that City of Hillsborough has planned for, and I don't know their demands as well as our own. So I'm not completely sure where they're at in terms of their need for water through this piece of pipe. Tom, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, so I've been having conversations with Nikki Everson with the City of Beaverton and with Chad Lynn, I'm sorry, with the City of Hillsborough, and Chad Lynn with City of Beaverton. And this doesn't impact City of Beaverton. They're comfortable and supportive of it. With City of Hillsborough, they're in a similar rate situation that's got them pretty uncomfortable, as I understand it. So they have a lot of concerns about any cost increases with the WWSP. This would be a way for them to get some additional, financial capacity. So at this point, they're supportive of this in its thinking. I think there's still questions we have to answer on this to make sure that I'm guessing we'd have to at least get their first connection, wherever that is, on this to that point, but the rest could be delayed. So that's what we're doing now, and Dave's team is working to look at the details there. But right now, City of Hillsborough is certainly asking for to consider this as an option. I'll just throw out there to the board that they are asking, and Beaverton was asking about, well, could we delay the 2026? Could we push that out further? And at this point, that's where it gets really messy for us, because that's where we start trading fairly significant dollars, and there may not be much cost advantage at all to us doing something like that. So that's right now, this is really the easiest of the big decisions.
This is Jim Doan. I've got a couple of questions. Is this really an increase in project cost? Or is it just a timing issue? And I don't mean to minimize it by saying just, but has the project increased by $70 million?
I'll start on this, Dave, if that's okay, and then like any large project, you're going to see cost increases, and Dave's team's been working on the preliminary baseline 6.0, and we are seeing right now increases to that 6.0 in the $40 million range. Now, Dave's team is working to bring those back down, and I'm pretty confident they're going to probably be able to get that down from 40 million, but I don't think it's realistic that they're going to get to zero.
And that's due to
that's where I'm going to let
material
Dave
increases, inflation.
I'll let Dave jump in on that one.
What?
Yeah, Commissioner Doan, it's due to a lot of things. So the PLW2 project that we've been talking about has been extraordinarily difficult. And this is an example of a project that the more you get into it, the more you realize how difficult it is going to be. I can explain in detail, but suffice to say, right now, the baseline 6, our draft baseline that we're looking at, so 5.2 is the baseline that was approved last year. We've done our draft baseline, which is baseline 6. Baseline 6 is $40 million more, roughly, than baseline 5.2. And there's a whole host of little bits and pieces of what adds up to that $40 million. 13.5 of that is due to the PLW2 project. What we found is that the traffic impacts associated with constructing that project has required us to redo our traffic control plan to the satisfaction of Washington County, which is going to greatly extend the duration of that construction project. We've also found various seismic risks associated with that alignment. That means we have to go with thicker pipe here and there. And so on and on and on, these things add up, and we've added $13.5 million to that project through the course of designing that work. There's other things that we've done on the program that, as we've defined them, one of them is communications. So communications broadly across the program. The design team, broadly, design and operations team, landed on fiber optics, where we had previously thought radio communication would be adequate. After doing the radio study and a lot of other work, we've found that fiber optics is the right way to go for resiliency and all the other reasons that would make that a good decision. But that adds about $10 million to the baseline that wasn't in there before. And so there's a number of things like that have added up to this, that it's part of executing a big program like this. As you define these things, sometimes the costs go up. and that's what we presented. And so now we're dealing with like, what can we change to make the costs go back down? And there's always things we can do. But as you know, going along on a program like this or any kind of project like this, the further you get into it, the less control you have in terms of managing the cost.
Dave, if we postpone PLW 2.0, does that shoot our resilience efforts? I mean, it seems to me if we're taking a significant piece of this thing and making it less resilient, then perhaps the whole project has become less resilient. I think we have to be real honest with our population. If we're doing this and it affects resiliency, then we have to state that up front. And I don't see how not doing this keeps resiliency at the same level.
Where it hurts the district in terms of resilience is that you go from three major connections down to two. As Carrie Peck pointed out, what's critical for TVWD in terms of really completing this is completing the MPE pipeline out to the Metzger area and to the connection in Beaverton Hillsdale Highway to the Washington County supply line, and the connection at Farmington and 209th. Extending it up to Sunset Highway to the Cornelius Pass station up there, that would complete the system, and that would basically provide the branching really for the whole WWSS and supplying the TVWD system. So the challenge is so in terms of resiliency, we still have the connectivity of the 2 points. We still have the resiliency built in throughout the system in terms of the pipelines and the 2 storage reservoirs and all the resilience that's going into the treatment plant and everything else. All we're doing is we're moving this one piece of the puzzle out however many years it makes sense for the cash flow to work out to moderate the rate increases. So technically, yeah, it does impact resilience to a certain degree, but there still would be a lot of resilience built into the system.
Okay, this is going to be an odd question, but if we do this, if we don't do 2.0, what do we do in 2 years when we're short another $70 million? Where do we go? I mean, I've lived with the Portland Water Bureau, and they did all the accounting niceties. And then when we really needed to have that money, it just wasn't there because it had already been used for things that perhaps weren't as important as the current things. But I just want to make sure we're not telling people 6 and we need 7.5, because if we do 6 now, we're going to need 7.5 in 2 years. I mean, can we postpone this long enough that we can get in where the debt service ratio can help us? We'll be forced to have rate increases because we have a required debt service ratio to make things work. I'm trying to figure out if this is, how does this affect our ability to deal with problems in the future? So, answers, Paul, Tom, Dave.
Yeah. So you, Commissioner Doan, you hit exactly on the concern that I have about developing financial capacity, and so we still have, you're giving us, the board is giving us ranges tonight that we can start to work in, and it's going to help refine everything. But we need to build financial capacity for future increases. And so that is the work that's still left to be done. And that's the one thing, that's that risk table in the prior slides that we talked about that we have little control over. To say, yeah, if 2 years from now Dave comes in and says, look, the construction costs on these combined projects went up by this amount, we're going to be in a really tough spot. And really our only solution at that point, once we're under construction, we're looking at higher rate increases, because that's what's driving it. So, it's the higher. What I'm trying to say, without, I don't want to be any kind of fear monger or creating any anxiety beyond what may exist, but the higher we can go today, the better we're going to be in the future to be able to come down. Is really what I think Paul and I are saying to the board. That's the situation we're in. If we're hired today, and we find out a year and a half from now, 2 years from now, that the positive risks come into play. In other words, that revenues come in higher, the economy is recovering stronger than what we thought. Other project costs came in line or even below. We would be in a position to come back to the board and say, okay, how we thought we were at 7.5% for 4 years? Well, look, it turns out we can actually come down from that and come in 2 years actually where we're saying maybe that's going to be 6%. So that's the, I'll be honest, rate increases are never good. They're always needed, but they're never good. And I think the board is more comfortable with the idea of, look, the last thing we want to do is say we can do 6 and then find out 2 years from now we need to be at 8.
I guess that's really my point. I mean, 4 years ago we were talking 13% rate increases till 2026. That was how this thing was going to be financed. And then we got the WIFIA loan, and in the euphoria for getting the WIFIA loan, we went the other direction. We cut the rate increases back too much, and we can't undo that. We can't undo what we told people. But boy, I would really be happy with a 7.5, and in 2 years be able to trip that back down instead of going with 6 now and then in 2 years having to go 9. That's my feeling. But then I always like to have resources available to anticipate things going worse than we thought they were. But anyway, that's my thought.
Well, just summarizing what I think I've heard so far is nobody on the board is advocating for anything less than 6. And I've heard substantial concern that maybe the delay of 2.0 might have some unintended, very negative future consequences in terms of rate increases. So maybe we should be open to the 7.5. Is that a fair way to summarize it for the rest of the board?
Bernice, this is Jim Duggan. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I'm starting to have some second thoughts about my thought that 6.0 was a sweet spot, especially when I think about the tricky property negotiations that need to be done. And if we do anything regarding PLW from a policy perspective, I would want to say we delay everything up to just the construction of it, and maybe not push it out 10 years. Maybe see what putting it toward the end of the WWSP, a little further out than what it is currently scheduled. See if that's doable and what that does for the rates. But yeah, I'm having second thoughts about that as well.
This is Dick. I also, as much as I would hate to go 7.5. I totally understand the arguments for that, and so I'd go along with that if that's what it's going to take.
Okay, and I see Commissioner Sanders' hand up.
Yeah. Again, I think everybody's saying what I'm thinking, which is unless it is, a complete necessity on our partner's side to delay PLW 2.0, I would prefer that we maintain a path towards completion of 2.0, maybe pursuing exactly what Commissioner Duggan had just said about altering the timeline a little bit, but looking at 7.5 and keeping PLLW 2.0 in the process. Oops.
Okay, so nobody's going low ball, and we're inching upward. So I hope staff has gotten what they need. We're almost at 8:30, and we have yet another item on the agenda, as well as an executive session ahead of us. So I am going to propose, if it's okay with Chief Engineer Pack, that we perhaps delay the informational presentation on the Regional Water Providers Consortium until another time.
Chief Engineer Pack is not going to cry at that suggestion.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that. That's the last thing I'd want.
I actually thought that we the agenda was pretty packed as we were getting ready for the meeting. So this is fine. You'll be able to hear what great things the consortium is doing. Maybe we'll bring it back to you guys on during the work session next couple weeks from now.
That would be cool. But this has been a great discussion, but I like I said, I am worried about time because we still have an executive session ahead of us. And as I mentioned earlier, Paul has more slides about the financial update, but you all saw those in your agenda packet, and they're not, this discussion that we've just been having was certainly in my mind the most important part of the financial update that we needed to have tonight. So if staff has got what you need about that, and if the other commissioners are amenable, I'd like to adjourn the meeting and move to our executive session.
I concur.
Absolutely. This is Dick. I absolutely concur.
Past your bedtime, isn't it?
Geez, oh, Pete, how long can we stretch this out?
I know. And Jim Doan, you've got your hand up?
Oh, this is Jim Duggan. I concur. I'm sad we don't get to hear Carrie talk about the Regional Water Providers Consortium, but believe me, I think nothing will change in the next 2.5 weeks that we need to worry about it. So I'm fine.
Well, it is the annual report, so presumably and I did love the slides, I have to admit, but we'll see them at a future date. Commissioner Doan, you have your hand up?
Yes, I just want to compliment David and his staff. At the end of last week, I received the packet for the intake facilities, and the attachments were all in black and white. And you have absolutely no idea what a difference that made for me. And I just really was just blown away by the fact that doing this made my life so much easier. I thought it wouldn't make any difference at all, but it was like a miracle. Anyway, I want to pass that on to Dave and his staff, that that was really a job well done, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for the compliments. I'll pass that along to the team. Appreciate it.
That's good to hear that that was successful. So since everybody seems to be in agreement that we've had enough for now, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting, and I'd like to remind everybody that we do have an executive session, and it's a separate link. It's a separate invitation on your Outlook